Hello everyone, Zeki here. Today we're talking about a game from Nipponichi Software, or NAS for short. It's the latest entry in their short game series, Warui Osama to立派な勇者, or its localized name, The Cruel King and the Great Hero. Released on June 24th, 2021 in Japan, and set for a March 1st, 2022 release in the US, Warui Osama to立派な勇者features RPG gameplay with easy-to-understand mechanics that anyone can pick up. Its most outstanding feature is probably the storybook aesthetic, with almost, if not all, visual elements of the game being completely hand-drawn and presented like you're reading through a storybook, except it's through a video game. Being a storybook, it has extra emphasis on the story. It follows the tale of a child named Yu and her foster father, the Dragon King. Yu aspires to be a great hero like her late father, who defeated the Demon King before Yu was even born. She trains every day with the help of the Dragon King, except little does she know that the Dragon King was actually the Demon King in the past, and he's raising her up so that one day, Yu may defeat him to become the great hero. With the summary out of the way, let's get into the actual review part. So, here's an outline of how I'll talk about things. Alright, so let's start with the one-paragraph summaries. So the game can feel pretty slow at times, usually related to moving around and trying to get to places. It's clear that they wanted to make sure the players would take in the visuals with how some rooms feel like extremely long walks, which aren't even that long really, I'll admit, but it makes repetitive tasks even more repetitive, such as grinding and things like that. You don't need to view the scene anymore after going through it a bunch of times, right? But aside from that, there's only some minor parts that may need some improvement, which I may go over later, but it's nothing too detrimental to the game. For a game that's pretty basic and only commits to having bare-bone elements, it has a lot of substance, brought about by how everything was presented, especially in the artistic side. From the storytelling, to the art style, to the music, to the characters, the design, the pacing. There's a lot of things that the game did just right to really make an impression on me. Props to the artistic directors of this game, as I don't think I've felt this strongly about what is essentially a fairy tale game for a very long time. I also think this is a game that anyone can pick up regardless of age, as it's an easy enough game, but it doesn't spoon-feed you the solutions, making it not too easy. And the battle system isn't a mash A kind where you can just win by repeatedly pressing a single button. Nope, you still have to think. This game quickly became my second favorite of NIS short games, second only to Mad Rat Dead, and while I've only played it twice so far, I still have very fond impressions of the game, especially as I listen to the soundtrack even now. Me, a grown man almost in my 30s, experiencing a fairy tale for the first time and enjoying it so much? This game definitely has something special, and while I don't think it will be for everyone, I think it's something that anyone can pick up and have a good time with. Okay, now we'll proceed with the detailed explanations of the good and the bad parts. Again, remember that I did play the Japanese version, so some parts of the dialogue may not reflect in the English version whenever it comes out. I sure hope they at least keep the same feel though. Bad part number 1. Traveling can feel extremely slow at times. So this is my only one major complaint about this game. If you're trying to do all the quests, which I highly recommend by the way, there will undoubtedly be times where you'll need to keep coming back to the same area to run errands or hunt for a few things, be it finding specific monsters or items that you need to locate. You report back and then find out that you still need to do something else in what is possibly the same area again. If you've played The Liar Princess before, there's a good chance that they're using probably the same engine, so you can get a feel for how fast you can travel. Now, consider how some dungeons can have like maybe 30 or more rooms, and you need to travel all that while taking care of random encounters. Yu also doesn't get the ability to run in some rooms when her level isn't high enough to easily overpower the monsters, meaning, unless you've been doing some prior grinding or going to an old area, you'll be stuck walking through a new dungeon, which again I guess is due to the artists really wanting you to look at the environment. It's not exactly a bad thing, but some quests will have you going through parts of a dungeon where you still can't run. And even if you can run, it still doesn't feel fast enough for me. This is mostly obnoxious with some of the quests in the Honey Forest, where you need to go between two different areas which are at least 7 rooms apart, I believe, and you have to go through each a minimum of 6 times. You can use some of the available warp mechanics, sure, but one of the rooms that you need to go to don't even have a warp going there, so you're forced to walk there from the nearest warp. Long story short, traveling can feel like such a slog once you start doing things like extra tasks, grinding, backtracking, basically anything that involves going through an area you've already been in. You might feel that the game really slows down on those parts. As I said earlier, I only really have one major complaint. The other things are just some minor things or even just nitpicks that aren't necessarily something that people would see as a bad thing maybe, but I'll list them down here anyway. So this game lacks a New Game Plus or a way to view previous cutscenes. Especially in a storybook-driven game, I would want to view the previous cutscenes. In the modern area of these kinds of games, many of them offer a convenient way to let you review cutscenes and or story points without having to create a completely new game. Here, you'll need to start a new game if you want to go back to them, or load an old save if you have it. I think some characters could use a bit more skills. While I understand that the game aims to be as simple as possible, 2 of the playable characters don't even have a full page of skills. Now this one is a minor nitpick. I wish that the game really had a post-game of sorts. I mean, there is a bonus dungeon that you can go to at the final chapter at least, which is a challenge, but I feel like they could do with a bit more. And another minor nitpick, I wish there were difficulty options for the game. I would love for the game to be a bit harder. Although, with the simple mechanics, I don't think just increasing the stats of the enemies is really a good idea. It'll just cause people to grind even longer instead of strategizing better, to be honest. And that's all I have for the bad parts. Let's get into the good parts next, and I feel like I may be talking a bit much on this one. So the first good thing is that it has a very, very colorful cast of characters. This game was one of the huger casts in most of NIA's short games, and I don't think any of them feel like they can be excluded and still feel like the same story can be delivered. The major characters have a lot going on with them, especially as you follow Yu and the Dragon King story, and encounter the other party members that Yu will make friends with. While everything does revolve around Yu's growth towards her path to becoming a hero, their interactions with the rest of the cast bring about their personality in a very show-over-tell manner, which is pleasantly ironic for a game that's narrated like storybook and is thus highly dependent on the writing and the player's ability to understand what they're reading. But to top it all off, the Monster Village's residents are some of the most endearing minor cast of characters I have ever seen or witnessed in any story so far. When you first arrive at the Monster Village and start taking quests, it all feels like what the game would simply call it, use acts of kindness. But as you do more of them, you'll then notice how these characters are going through their own character development. And even if it's all very fairy tale-like conflicts and simple fantasy RPG quests, the characters and their interactions are presented in such a way that you really get the feel for them as complete characters. Some groups of the village residents even end up crossing over with each other, and while they will eventually form their own groups, I can't help but feel that the Monster Village's residents all form one big neighborhood. I don't know if it's this particular thing where Japanese writers will use a very Western fantasy setting and then give it their own Japanese writing flavor, but there's just really something special here despite the designs feeling like it's something only children can enjoy. It's just amazing. The second good part is that the storytelling really hits you right in the feels. Following up from the characters, they wouldn't be as great as they are if the story isn't told in an equally great way. Being a fairy tale, the progression of the plot, the twists, the outcomes, and all that good stuff may be obvious to most older readers, especially those who have read a lot of storybooks. That doesn't mean that we can't enjoy those kinds of stories though, especially if it's presented in such a good way. As the narrator Kondorenia says in her comments about the game when she was working at it, 今日はここまでと決めても、続きの展開が気になって、ずっとページをめくっていたら、すぐに最後まで読み終わっていました。And that's kind of what I felt too, actually. I just wanted to keep knowing what happened next for some reason. I can't really explain it. I was pleasantly surprised that there were some twists which I didn't see coming, actually. It's still a story that was easy to understand, but it's just so engaging in ways that I can't really find words for. Even kids would have a great time enjoying this story and its characters, especially given that it's a fairy tale. Though maybe there's this one chapter where it was full of what the actual hell NIS elements, which I guess some people expected, given that people like, Furuya Masayuki, who directed darker titles like Firefly Diary and Rose in the Twilight, was actually an integral part of the staff for this game. But I digress. Just to reiterate, the story feels like its standard fantasy storybook fairy tale, except it has its own special twists which give it a unique charm that makes it hard to put the game down, and has left quite a strong impression on me. Third good part, the music is memorable and helps you relive the story again. I'll confess that I actually got the idea to write this review simply because I cannot stop listening to the game's music. It's not what people would call like a banger quote unquote, given that it's all fantasy themed to fit with the setting and storybook aesthetic. Instead, it works together with the storytelling aspect to leave an impression on the player who experienced the story, helping them relive the emotions that they felt in certain parts of it. As people who have watched the trailer know, this game can get really emotional, and the most important events have their own songs. While I can't make you listen to it, as just the song itself already contains potentially massive spoilers, the final boss theme just really hits me really hard. It somehow sends a wave of memories of Yu's experiences to me. All that she's been through to get to where she is now, standing between her and the final obstacle she must defeat to finally become a great hero. All the ups and downs of her life so far, the resolve that she has to take that moment, knowing that she has to fight for something and cast aside some things that she believed in for the greater good. Things like that, good things like that. And it's not even the only track that has me captured in its charm. A lot of the songs towards the end of the game have a somewhat similar effect on me too. I keep talking about the songs near the end of the game, though that doesn't mean that the other songs aren't pretty good. The Monster Village theme and the Mountain Home themes are very memorable too. Sometimes they just make you want to dance alongside it, all while remembering what kind of memories lie in each of these places. The standard and boss battle themes emphasize the theme of the game, that being used training. I honestly wish I had a better vocabulary to describe it, as while it's not extremely good like some other songs in RPGs, every time I hear the battle music come up in my playlist, my mind will immediately jump into thoughts about the story of the cruel king and the great hero, wandering off into the adventure that is Yu's training to herodom. On the artists, people usually credit Shikata Akiko mostly for the music in this game, given that she gave us admittedly 3 very gloriously memorable tracks that bring out the kind of emotions that you'll experience from it. But I desperately want to tell people just how good of a work Matsumoto Takeshi and his team did. Matsumoto-san is actually the music director and is credited as the artist for every other song except for one that's credited to Mika Koga instead. So the battle themes, the Monster Village theme, the Mountain Home theme, the final boss theme, it's all Matsumoto Takeshi's work. And I really wish he and his team would be credited more with just how well they made the music so appropriate for a fantasy fairy tale world. So the next good thing about the game is just the beauty of 2D hand-drawn art really comes out. Before everything, shoutouts once again to the beautiful art direction of Oda Sayaka. I know this is late, but congratulations on the success of The Liar Princess and The Blind Prince. And here's hoping that the Cruel King and the Great Hero will perform great as well. She's the one responsible for the game looking and feeling that the way it is, so remember the name everyone, it's Oda Sayaka. In the times now where 3D graphics are considered the dominant style, it seems that 2D graphics are only really found in indie games and the few select genres that need such graphics nowadays. This game boasts not only beautiful 2D artwork, it's 2D hand-drawn artwork. Pretty much everything is hand-drawn here, from the backgrounds to the characters to the user interface to the storybook page cutscenes. The computer part probably only comes in for programming the layers of the background in it. No visual changes were made by the computer, I'm pretty sure. It's actually because of the beauty of the art, especially in the starting forest, that I would insist that if they can, people should play this on the PS4 or a PS5 over the Switch version. Of course, feel free to play this on whatever platform you like. I mean, depends on what you have really. I played on the Switch first and then the PS4 later. And I don't know how to explain, but for some reason the background and the extra effects just pop out more like a storybook on the PS4 version. The layering is much more visible and it really gives the feel of a pop-up storybook. The extra effects like the leaves blowing in the wind, they're so smooth. The few frame nature of the animations of the characters, I think that's actually an intentional design choice. It pairs very well with the storybook aesthetic, giving a similar feel to those paper flipping animations that are popular among kids. This probably isn't the most beautiful 2D game I've experienced, I'm kinda sure, but every time I start a new game and have to breathe in all the backgrounds again and move you through the environment, it just feels like such a magical place to be in, just because of the visuals. It's unbelievable to me that it's all hand-drawn. It really goes to show that traditional media are still very viable to this day. The next thing I have to talk about is that the gameplay is for anyone without being too easy. While I'm not too crazy about the gameplay of this, given that it sticks to being a simple RPG, after thinking about it for a while, the system has just enough so that players of all kinds of RPG experiences can enjoy. Whether this is your first turn-based RPG, or you primarily play RPGs, the game is just enough to walk you through its simple mechanics while keeping some extra mechanics that make it so that the game isn't just about, equipping the strongest equipment and then mashing the confirm button to auto-attack to victory. First, there's only 5 stats to worry about: HP, vitality, attack, defense, and speed. And just from the names alone, it's kind of easy to understand what they do. Each of the 4 characters specialize in certain aspects, having their own stat lines and skills that have various effects. Although the skill count for each character is kept low, which I think is not too big of a deal, especially when you consider that some RPGs basically have late games where you're mostly only using 3 to 5 skills anyway. Weapon and armor are mostly character specific, so you'll know which equipment belongs to who, but accessories are for anyone, and most accessories give significant effects, especially into the late game. So you'll either want to give certain characters either specific accessories that maybe bring out their strengths or cover their weaknesses. Speaking of weaknesses, monsters do have their own weaknesses, but it's not the standard elemental weakness kind of way. In fact, collecting monster weaknesses is actually the most difficult challenge in the game, as you need to figure out and inflict what weakness the monster had to record something in the monster decks. These weaknesses can range from the simple, elemental weakness, to some complex behavioral patterns like being prevented from attacking in a certain way. Items, they're pretty important like most other RPGs. In this game, there's a bunch of items in this game. From, the standard recovering of health or vitality, to more complex items like being able to slather a unit with honey. It'll make sense once you get there, I'm pretty sure. You have to learn how to use your items effectively and efficiently, or you'll probably end up stuck in certain battles. It feels like I've made the game mechanics a bit more complicated than they are. But honestly, it just isn't. You just need to use a bit of game sense and you should be fine. And even if you're not very experienced with these kinds of games, this is a perfect entry point into the genre and could maybe help you with approaching more complex RPGs later. Here at Z's Reviews, we don't give ratings in numbers, as people have different tastes. Rather, we'll try to point out which audiences should or shouldn't get this game. So did you play and like The Liar Princess and The Blind Prince? I guess depending on what aspect you like, you may or may not enjoy this game. Although both are fairy tale storybook fantasy worlds created by the same team, Liar Princess is more of a love story with a cast of only 3 major characters, while Cruel King is a hero's adventure story featuring 2 major characters but with a number of supporting characters. If you love the art style, then by all means, please buy this, it's so beautiful. If you like the emotional aspect of the game, then this game has that too, in droves actually, so go ahead please. If you like the short but sweet aspect of the previous game, then I'm not sure. The Cruel King could take an average of 20 to 25 hours playing blind, so it's definitely not a short game. It is a sweet game though. And of course, if you're not too fond of the switch to RPG style instead of the puzzle platformer style of the previous game, then maybe consider, maybe think twice. So how about the players from other NAS games, especially NAS short games like the Yomawari series, Void Terrarium, etc. Well, I still consider all the Sayaka's works to be kinda part of the same family of games, featuring little girls as protagonists with simple gameplay but varying experiences. If you love the dark elements from the games by Furuya or Mizukami, then maybe think twice, as even though there are still dark elements here, it's nowhere near compared to the games of those 2 directors. I mean, this is an E-rated game after all. If you like the simple game aspect though, then by all means please go ahead. If you like the little girl protagonist aspect, oh for sure, definitely get this. Yu is definitely one of the better protagonists, like just simple but sweet. If you want to know if this performs well among the other NES games, I think it might actually be one of the better ones, so maybe please get it. If you love fantasy monster designs, then there might be some pretty good catches for you here too. Now let's move on to if you haven't played other NES games before. Are you just looking for a JRPG to add to your collection? Yeah, sure, I can still recommend this actually. Do take note that if you're a bit picky on the price tag, be aware that this is still a full price game. And if you're used to the bigger titles with all its content and AAA productions, then you might want to change your expectations going to this. Don't lower them, change them, as the Cruel King offers more of a unique experience rather than a lighter experience. But if you like RPGs with great characters and writing, then I will 100% recommend this to you. The characters are probably the strongest point of this game, with a colorful cast that really brightens up and gives so much life to what otherwise would be a game anchored too much by simplistic gameplay. The characters and their extra actions complete the world of this game so much. Do you like beautiful 2D artwork games? I will 100% recommend this too. Beautiful, fully hand-drawn 2D artwork really comes alive in this game, proving that traditional ways of creating art can still mesh with the demands of today's games. You can sometimes forget that it's going for a storybook aesthetic actually and just say, oh, this is such a beautiful game, it's such a pretty game. Now this is going to sound like a pretty out there recommendation, but like, are you a parent and want to introduce an RPG or a game that can be enjoyed by your child and the whole family? I will then highly recommend this to you. While you may need to guide your child a bit on how to work on strengthening characters and being patient to walk through environments to get to the next story point, the storybook feel is something that I feel people of all ages will be able to enjoy. And it's also among the simplest JRPGs I've played so far, but it doesn't hand over the solution to you. Speaking of, if you want just a casual or simple RPG that you want to pick up on the side, definitely this is one of those RPGs. Very low entry floor to appreciate this one on a gameplay level. You don't need too high of a game sense to get through this game at all. You just need some patience and perseverance, and that would be enough. However, if you're looking for a challenging JRPG, you might want to look somewhere else. There are some difficult parts of this game, but their solutions I feel aren't complex enough for the demands of the modern focused RPG player. Hardcore grinding also wasn't part of the game's design really. There's not really the satisfaction of those big numbers popping up on the screen. Heck, Final Fantasy 1's numbers are even bigger than this game. Though, if you're still playing this, there is the satisfaction of trying to deal as much damage as you can, like maybe breaking 2000 damage at some point. Like if you can do that, yeah, that's actually an achievement, but well, not a literal like PlayStation trophy or something, it's just a feel-good achievement. And that's all I have, I think. The English version of this game is coming out like really soon, like less than a month from the time I wrote this. And I hope that it'll do well just like The Liar Princess did. I hope you guys can also experience the same magic that I felt, wandering in such a simple yet beautiful fantasy world, following the emotional story of you and the Dragon King, and experiencing the story of all the other minor characters and supporting characters as well. So if I got you interested somehow, I'll put links to the purchase pages for the games in the description of this video, so feel free to check them out if you're interested. Alright, so I'm going to the extra parts here. Honestly, feel free to skip this part, as this is just me making some extra hype and worry comments about a few specific things in this game. Despite being a children's fairy tale, the characters are made in such a Japanese style writing, and it really hits the anime-ish cast feeling for some of them. I really just want to take this time to fanboy over Sakasa, or I believe his name is Saibat in the localization. He's my favorite character out of everyone in this game. He's just so good. He's cute, has a lot of personality, extremely fun, expressive, has some good story to him. It helps that he's also a bit unique on the species side, although I kind of wish I knew what kind of specific bat he's based on. His Japanese name Sakasa just means reverse or upside down. What does the Sai in Saibat refer to? I kind of want to know actually. And actually Saibat is the number 2 thing I'm most worried about in the localization. His dialogue really sells him. Even if the only voiceover in this game is the narration, you can really feel his personality come out just with his dialogue. However, the dialogue is something that definitely works in Japanese, but I'm not sure if it'll have the same impact in English. I'm still praying for the best though, so please, NIS America, please localize Saibat's dialogue as best as you can. So I keep talking about Saibat. Saibat may be my favorite character, but I also have a clear number 2 favorite. It's actually one of the residents of the monster village. Her name is Yamaneko in Japanese, but I don't know how they'll translate it or localize her name yet. You'll meet this character early on. One of the first side quests you can take actually. But, oh my god, I really don't want to say any spoilers, but let me just say that, like Saibat, she ends up having a lot of personality. But you have to get to know her first, so please, guys, if you are playing this game, complete all the side quests. I highly recommend it. I can't say anything beyond that because it's huge spoilers. I really wish I had someone else to talk to about Yamaneko. Characters aside, I mentioned earlier in the Saibat portion, like he's the number 2 thing I'm most worried about in the localization. Actually, the number 1 thing I'm most worried about in the localization, it's involving another big spoiler, but it's something that can completely get ruined depending on how brave they are in localizing it. Well, I guess it's not exactly a directly risky dialogue, but it's got some heavy... It goes heavy on some implications that they might think that Western audiences shouldn't have thoughts about. Let's see how they'll take it though. It's fun at the end of the game, so I'm gonna have to worry for like 15 hours while playing the game in anticipation of how they translated it. Moving to another topic, I have to mention something about the music again. I mentioned earlier that there's this one track that wasn't by Matsumoto Takashi or Shikata Akiko, where someone named Kogamika was credited instead. It's actually a lullabied version of the Mountain Home song, and there was this one time where I legit fell sound asleep as this tune came up on my playlist. I guess there's really just an inner kid in me still, if a lullaby can still put me to sleep even as I'm already approaching my 30s. Just as I was typing that, the final boss theme came up in my shuffled playlist again. I have to mention just how good it is again, once again, just the final boss theme is just so good. It's so good at invoking emotions towards the game. Guys, please, I beg of you, play it until the end while completing all the side quests. Experience everything. It won't take you more than 25 hours unless you go for all the trophies and achievements. There's just so much magic in this game, I cannot explain it. I really wish I can experience it again for the first time. Okay, I think I've said enough about the game at this point. It might be getting a bit too long. So yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna upload my English playthrough of The Cruel King and the Great Hero, but I feel like I should just to show my loyalty to it. Well, we'll see when the time comes though. It's less than a month before the game releases, so yeah. Thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.